Have you ever been angry with God? Maybe you look at the things that are happening in your life and everything seems to be going all the wrong way, and you pray and things only seem to be getting worse, and you wonder, what's going on here, God? What gives? Why are you not helping me? Or maybe a loved one is ill, and you're praying for that person to be healed, and they're not healed, and it just seems to be getting worse. Or maybe even someone dies very tragically and suddenly in an accident. And you turn and say, God, why do you let these things happen? Why didn't you stop it? Why were you not there for us? Well, if you've ever felt that way, you're not alone, because many people have asked that question. In fact, it's one of the most common reasons why some people say, do not worship God or even don't believe in him, because they say, with all of these evil things that happen in my life, I pray, I try to be good, and these bad things still happen, and God doesn't stop them. Either he doesn't love me, he doesn't care about me, or he's not good, like they say, or he actually just doesn't exist. And it's understandable. However, when we ask the question that way, we've already lost any argument and any chance at healing from that. Because what we discover right away is that we've asked a question for which we will never find a satisfiable solution. In fact, all it does for us is give us a target for our anger, but it doesn't give us healing, and it doesn't give us the peace we need to move on and make sense of what has happened. We have decided in our very limited wisdom that God should work that way. If God is so good, there should not be evil in the world. And we imagine that he should just stop it. And the first thing we have to remember is that God did not desire that there would be evil in the world. God created a perfect world. He gave us paradise. But Adam and Eve messed that all up. By disobeying God and listening to the devil, they gave him his power to work in the world, and all the evil comes from him, not from God. And he rejoices, actually, when we blame God for all the evil, because then he's getting us to use his weapons against God and turn them against him. And he actually rejoices in his victory. And so I've always felt that every time we ask, God, if you're so good, why did this happen? We just gave the devil his victory. We fell right into his trap and did exactly what he wants us to do. God will save us. He did decide to save us from our sins and from all the evil, but not the way that you and I would have planned it. We would have figured he should have been like Genie, just go bang, bang, bink, and make all the evil disappear. But he didn't do that. He had a much better way. And if we think it through, we'll probably realize that it is a better way than just eliminating all of the evil. And that is to be with us each and every step of the way, to help us go through all the evil and turn it into a triumph for us. God, what we're celebrating today is not merely Jesus' birthday. You notice we don't decorate the church with balloons and streamers, and we're not going to bring out a big birthday cake and sing happy birthday to Jesus. While we are celebrating Christ's birth, certainly, it's more completely the feast of the incarnation, that God has become man. And God's way of redeeming us was to take on our nature so as to unite it with his. God became a man so that man could become God. We realize that. If we think that through, how awesome that is. He humbled himself to come and take on our human nature, to exalt us, to take on his. And when we enter his kingdom, we will be as God himself. As the ancient fathers of the church used to say, God became man so that man could become God. And we're not going to actually be members of the Trinity. We can't go that far. But we will be brought as close as we possibly can to being completely in union with God. And that is something awesome, beyond anything this world could even begin to imagine giving us. And we will even sit in judgment over the nations, as the Lord promised. That is an awesome gift that he has given to us. But of course, as we know, the old saying, no pain, no gain. Well, something as awesome as that obviously doesn't come to us easily. Teddy Roosevelt once said words to the effect of, anything worth having cannot be achieved without great blood, sweat, and tears and sorrow. And when we think about it, we know that's true. We often talk about a labor of love, and we realize how greater we appreciate something when it's taken a great effort out of us to achieve it, rather than if it were just given to us very simply like a Christmas present that somebody gives us today. No, obviously we have to work on it. And sometimes to receive that eternity, that gift that the Lord has promised to us, means a lot of toil on our part. And it will mean some sorrows, and it will mean some suffering. And it's always been that way, even from the very beginning. If we want to see evidence of that, just look at any nativity scene, such as ours here. I think when we look at nativity scenes, we always see them as a beautiful, peaceful, bucolic scene. But if we look at the reality of what happened that first Christmas, we'll discover it was anything but that. First of all, not even getting into, because of time, all of the things dealing with the Annunciation to Mary, and will Joseph believe her, and what the other people in Nazareth must have thought of her, and all that information. But even getting to the point of when she was ready to give birth. Here she is, 9 months pregnant, and Caesar Augustus in Rome calls a census that everyone's to be enrolled, and Joseph has to take Mary from Nazareth all the way down to Bethlehem, because in Jewish tradition, someone considered themselves a resident not of the town where they lived, but of their ancestral hometown. And since Joseph was a descendant of David, they had to make the journey back to Bethlehem. And that was a journey of between 90 and 100 miles. Now, any woman who's been pregnant, at 9 months pregnant, even riding in a comfortable car for 90 to 100 miles can be very difficult. Imagine doing 90 to 100 miles on the back of a donkey. That could not have been very comfortable for Mary. And that's presuming that they even had a donkey. The scriptures don't tell us how Joseph and Mary got to Bethlehem. Traditionally, we've always shown her riding on the back of a donkey. But if Joseph didn't have a donkey, how did they get there? They walked. Imagine walking 90 to 100 miles when you're 9 months pregnant, and probably taking about a week to get there. That could not have been comfortable. And to make things worse, they finally get to Bethlehem, and there's no place for them to stay. And the best Joseph can do is find a place where animals are kept. And even the comfort of a stable that we might think that has doors and be nice and enclosed, well, that's our tradition. We take it from Western European understanding of when Francis of Assisi gave us the first nativity set in 1223. We've always pictured it the way we would know a stable, a place where animals would be kept. But actually, the place where Jesus was born was simply a cave, probably with some straw in it. We know that animals were involved because there was a manger there. And where there was a manger, there would obviously be animals. And do you know what a manger is? A manger is actually a feeding trough. It's a place where you would put straw or hay for an animal to eat, for the ox perhaps to come in and graze on it. So Jesus was born and laid in an animal's food dish, just as if somebody were to give birth today and lay the baby in a dog's supper dish. That's where Jesus was laid. Of course, the Eucharistic overtones of that are so obvious. Jesus was born to be our food. He was laid in a place where animals feed, because one day from the altar he will give us his flesh and blood as our food. So there's wonderful symbolism in that. But it was simply a cave with straw in it, no door on it. They were open-air caves. And with all of that straw, Joseph couldn't possibly light a fire to keep them warm. All the straw would burn and they would all burn to death. So it had to be chilly in there. And we don't know what animals were in there, but we can imagine certainly with a manger, there obviously were animals there. And domestic farm animals, well, they smell. And they don't smell pretty, do they? And they leave their droppings behind. So that must not have been a very comfortable situation for Mary and Joseph and Jesus at that point. And Joseph, Mary, they probably could have had every right to say, God, come on. We said we were going to do your will. We gave up everything to follow you and do this. Why do you have to make it so hard? Why can't you cut us some slack? Give us a break here. Well, they didn't. And you know what? We know it even got worse after that, because after the Magi left, Herod was looking to destroy the child, and they had to flee by night and go to Egypt. So it was one disappointment, one tragedy or trial after another. But they never complained. And in fact, what I always like to look at in any nativity set or any picture of that, most especially if you see a Madonna and Child, when Mary is holding Jesus in her arms, she's looking in his face, and all the smell and all the chill and all the difficulty doesn't matter. She has Christ right there. And I especially love the pictures where she's kissing him. She's kissing the very face of God. And she doesn't care about all the other difficulties in her life because she has Christ. She has her son there. She has God in her arms, and that's all that she needs. And I've always felt that to be a wonderful example for you and me, for how we should live. In the difficulties of our lives, remembering that God is present to us. We're not merely today remembering something that happened 2,000 years ago, that God became a man, but actually we're remembering God is with us each and every moment of our day. He's always there at every moment to comfort us, to help us along the way. And we look at his life and we realize that God came into our world, and the only way he did not identify with us, because he couldn't, was by being a sinner. He came into our world, a man like us, in all things but sin. And he lived the life that you and I live. Went through all of the dangers, all of the trials, all the sorrows, everything that happened. And most especially in his passion. When we look at what happened the night before he died, he was betrayed by one of his closest friends. And when he was arrested, his friends all abandoned him. And he was brought before the leaders who falsely accused him of saying things against Moses and the law that he never said. They actually accused him of being the devil, and they condemned him to death and handed him over to the Romans, who had to violate all of Roman jurisprudence to get Jesus condemned to a death when Pilate had no reason to and could not find any crime in him. And so all of law and order from both the Jews and the Romans had completely broken down, and he handed them over to the Roman soldiers, who treated him very brutally on the way to his death and crucified him. And even while he was hanging on the cross, they scoffed at him, they mocked him, they ridiculed him. And from the cross, the first thing he said was not, "Father, get them back for what they did to me," but, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." He went through all of that in his life so that if we ever turn to him and say, "Hey, God, do you understand my suffering?" his answer will be, "Yes. Yes, I do, because I've been there. I've walked the same walk you've walked. I've been there. I have gone through it, and I will help you through it." He entered into the dirt and the mud and all the filth of our world to show us a way through it. And that's what he does for us. He doesn't take away our pain, but comes to be with us to help us to go through it all. And step by step say, "Don't worry, I'm with you every step of the way." And when we bring our troubles before him, and we know he's there helping us, we find a joy, even in the midst of it, knowing we can make tremendous good come from them. In fact, there is even the most unspeakable of tragedies, God can make good come from them. But just because God makes good come from an unspeakable tragedy doesn't mean he caused it, and doesn't mean he desires or delights in it. But he can turn it around for our benefit. He is as sorrowful as we are when something bad happens to us, but he helps us through. Just as the Blessed Mother standing at the foot of the cross was as sorrowful as Jesus was, she knows our sorrow, and she also can pray for us because she sympathizes with us. She's been there. And so we can know the Lord's help in our lives through each and every moment. And the Lord also will help us when we need to. He'll send us a Simon of Cyrene, like he had, helping him bear his cross when it was too difficult. He helps us from time to time. And sometimes he does work a miracle. It's okay to pray for it. But when God works a miracle, that's up to him. And we certainly can't make it a prerequisite to say, well, God must give me this miracle before I believe in him. So pray for it, by all means. And if we receive the miracle, we thank him for it. But if not, and he says, no, I prefer, it's better for you to bear the suffering and grow closer to me, then accept it from God and say, this is how I am participating with him in bearing his cross and allowing him to help me to participate with him in redeeming the world. Remember that God humbled himself to come into our world to exalt us. And as he came to take on all the mud and all the dirt, we do the same, and good things can grow from that. Remember, flowers don't grow in crystal clear water. Flowers grow in dirt. And God can make wonderful good come from even the horrible things that happen in our lives. And that's what we're remembering today, that the Lord has come to save us, not by taking the pains away, but by turning those ways into the way that we defeat the devil at his own game, taking all of the weapons that he brought to try to turn us away from God and instead lead us closer to him and further into his embrace. I think one of the safest images we see for anyone is a child in his mother or father's arms. That child in their arms knows no fear, knows no pain. Everything is safe there. Or if we think of a child who's just scraped his knee and the mother or father is comforting the child, and just drying the tears as the child cries, that comfort means all the world to the child. But then we grow older. We become teenagers, and sometimes we go into rebellions, and then we become adults, and all of a sudden we forget to allow God to comfort us, and especially men. Men such as myself who try to be alpha men, always in control of everything, and we have to determine the outcome. It becomes very hard for us sometimes to step back and say, Lord, I need a hug today. But if we can remember to do that, to allow the Lord to give us his embracing caress, his caress of love, that no matter how big and strong we are, no matter how much we think we control our world, we all need a moment to just bask in the Lord's love and let him embrace us and say, do not be afraid. I am with you. No matter how bad it may be, know that the Lord is there by our side each and every step of the way. He came among us and he gives us himself as food in the Eucharist so that he can physically enter our bodies and we will be made of him. We will be with him on the cross as he suffers and dies, and we are risen again. And we know that the Lord, what we're celebrating today is not merely remembering that 2,000 years ago God became a man, but that he entered into our world and he stays with us always. Rejoice in the Lord always, for indeed God is with us. Merry Christmas.